And welcome to the spotlight on the one, the only, as I was duly informed on Reddit, that's Rear Admiral Mighty Jingles to you, sir. How you doing, buddy?
Yeah, not too bad, thanks. How are you doing?
Not too bad, not too bad. I've been quite excited for this one. It's a breakaway from the norm, the what I usually do, which is more your survival sort of gamers and stuff like that. But uh, I've my overall focus has been on people that, particularly people who've frontline services, military, police, that sort of thing, who also involve gaming in their life, because it always seems to get a bad rap, gaming. But I see so many people, particularly a lot of veterans, who do enjoy just gaming, and definitely that's been a big part of your channel is your military background.
Yeah. I think it's one of the things that that set me apart from because I mean the kind of games that I cover, they're not exactly I'm not playing Fortnite or anything. It's not
No.
mass media stuff. I tend to play stuff that's relatively niche. So it's reasonably easy to be a relatively big fish in a very small pond. But one of the things that the first thing that set me apart from everybody else when I started was everybody else was publishing once every 2 weeks, once a month, and I was the guy who was putting a video up every day, because I'm kind of like that. But also, the subjects that I was covering, I actually kind of knew what I was talking about because I had that military background. Knew nothing about tanks, so how that became popular, I have no idea. I never knew any more about tanks. Considering I started with World of Tanks, I never knew anything more about tanks than anybody else with access to the internet did. But the general military background, I think, lended a bit of authenticity that you wouldn't get from anybody without the military background.
Especially where I think it really paid dividends for you is yourself admitted not a great player of the game.
No.
You call yourself a very ordinary person. And as I was saying before we started the stream, I watch a lot of World of Warships creators. And there are some, your Flammus, your Flambasses, Trendless, and so on, who are just, they're outstanding players on a league apart from everyone else. But overwhelmingly, from what I can see, is you're pretty much the top of the pyramid for World of Warships creators. Nearly everyone's heard of you. Nearly everyone's watched your video, and it's not because you're the best, which is usually the case for a lot of games. It's because you bring something to your gameplay reviews. Like, I don't even know if I've ever actually watched a single gameplay of you playing. I don't know.
Probably not in a few years. No.
No,
I used to do that.
Yep. I can't honestly recall ever having watched a single video, and I go back regularly and I watch your old videos while I'm waiting, because you only do 2 a week, and while I'm waiting, something will pop up and it's like, yeah, I'll just watch that. It's just nice little, brain rot for my simple head, but I just enjoy the comedy, the history. They're probably my favorite ones, is when you incorporate the history of the ships into it, and that is where you set yourself apart.
Yeah, because I do. I mean, a lot of people that cover these sort of games, they get into them because they're interested in that sort of thing. But I think you're right. It is probably one of the things that does kind of set me apart. I mean, and you're right in that I'm not the greatest at these games. I mean, when I was covering World of Tanks, people would say that you watch Quickie Baby to get better at the game, but you watch Jingles to be entertained by the game. And I think that's probably fair. I mean, I kind of, how can I put it? It's probably one of the reasons why I don't live stream. I tried live streaming games on a couple of occasions and it never went well because I'm old and I'm slow. I get it, but it takes me a bit longer to get there than it does these people who are really, really good at the game. People like Flambass, people like Flammu, because I've played with Flambass and I've played with Flammu, and one thing that I noticed was that they are just so much faster at reacting to things. I come to the same conclusions and make the same decisions as them, but it takes me longer because I'm older and I'm slower. And you find that people like that who are very, very good at it's all about just processing information. and reaching the correct conclusions. And they're the people who, funnily enough, really, really good at the game to the degree that they are, would probably actually make very, very good warfare officers on board real warships, actually fighting the ship and can coordinate in the air and surface picture and the weapons and the sensors, because it's exactly the same type of ability to process information coming in from multiple different sources. They would actually make really, really good fighting officers on warships.
Especially in those more junior capacities where you really do need to think, the higher up the food chain you go, the less immediately you need to react to things. I remember going to my first ever commanding officer's orders group and watching the commanding officer of the battalion, and all he did was get up and say the mission statement. And then sat down again. And all the other officers had to do the rest of the orders brief. And I was like,
and it's the captains, it's the captains and lieutenants who are actually doing the planning. The lieutenant colonel or the colonel, he's just issuing what, like in the Navy, basically at action stations, the only thing the captain does is he sets command priorities: fight, float, move. Which order? Which one is the priority? It's almost always fight first, move second, and float third. But that will change depending on the circumstance. That is literally all the captain does. He just says, right, I want the ship to be able to fight. And then if it can't fight, I want the ship to be able to move. And if the ship can't move, I want the ship to be able to float. And then he just leaves it to his warfare officers. And it's exactly the same as in the army. The higher up you go, the less actual input you have, other than a very broad scheme. The
more medals you
have. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Now, we have already gone off on a weave. Let's go way, way, way back and start with young Jingles. So you, like myself, were around for pretty much the birth of video games as a mainstream thing. You'd probably remember the old arcades back in the day and go on there and whatever the currency was for you guys. I know it was 20 cents usually per game here in Australia for each slot on the old arcades and that. And then the advent of the home computers and the Atari 2600 and so on.
I had one of those.
With
the playing Pong. It's basically tennis with the paddle controller. Yeah. God, I remember that. Actually, it was an actual wooden console.
Yes.
Wow. That was a long time ago.
Makes you feel old, doesn't it?
It does, yeah. I just realized.
So what was your advent of gaming? What did you start with?
Oh, for me, Commodore Amiga 500. Well, technically the Acorn Electron, but we couldn't afford a computer. My mother got a second-hand Atari 2600 for one Christmas, and I think we only had 2 games for it. Pong was one of them, and that was amazing. But we didn't have the money we certainly couldn't afford to buy a computer. And it was only after I joined the Navy, went off on my first deployment. And obviously, when you're at war, there's not a lot of opportunity to go ashore and spend money. So I came back with all kinds of money saved up from 6 months away. And I had a friend who had a Commodore Amiga 500, and he was playing Shadow of the Beast. And it was the first time I'd ever seen parallax scrolling. That was, holy crap. What is this? Oh, it's £500. It was like £500 in 1990, 91, something like that. Not insignificant amount of money, but I was loaded coming straight back from this Gulf War deployment. So I thought, I'm having one of those. I went out, bought one, whole bunch of games. And that was basically it for me. So I kind of got into the whole gaming thing very late. I was like 21 before I actually owned my first home computer. And not through, not because I didn't want to, just because we were poor and we couldn't afford it. And it wasn't until I was earning my own money that I could actually, waste it on silly games. And that's where I started. And I was always into the Amiga scene. You had the old 80s, 90s rivalry between Amiga owners and Atari ST owners. Basically, functionally, very, very similar. Well, it's like everybody arguing over Oasis and Blur. It didn't matter. You like what you like. The only reason I upgraded to PC was because Lucasfilm Games, as they were known at the time, the LucasArts now, had announced that they were going to be doing a X-Wing flight simulator game. And I thought, oh, I'm having that. And it was supposed to come out on the Amiga. And then like 3 months before release, they said they were cancelling the Amiga version. It was going to be PC only. And I'm like, right, get the PC. And never looked back. I've always had a PC since. The first console I ever owned was actually an Atari, not Atari, I'm talking about, was actually a PlayStation 4 Pro. And the only reason I got that, never had a games console. Always computer, whether that was an Amiga or a PC. And the only reason I got the PlayStation was so I could play Red Dead Redemption 2. And it was totally worth it. And then they brought it out on PC a couple of years later anyway. So I should have just waited. But yeah, Red Dead Redemption 2, one of the greatest games ever made.
Rockstar have their issues, but my God, they know how to make a game, don't they?
Oh, yeah. It's right up there with like Cyberpunk 2077 for me. Is one of the greatest games ever made. It's just amazing the stuff that you could do. You look at because Ubisoft kind of cornered the market with the open world simulator, and they've been pushing the same game out for the last 15 years. But it's just busy work in a Ubisoft open world game. They haven't really done a good one since Assassin's Creed Odyssey. Valhalla was all right, wasn't awful, but it just became same shit, different day after that.
I just watched a video about that, actually, about the decline of the Assassin's Creed trilogy and just how sad it was. A bit like the Far Cry's.
Yeah,
Far Cry 2 was an amazing game, and then you look at the efforts they put into the ones of late, and they're terrible by comparison to Far Cry 2.
I think for me, it peaked with Far Cry 5. I liked that. I loved the shock ending, the way the story didn't go the way that anybody expected it to. And then Far Cry 6 was just a parody of itself. It was embarrassingly bad. The difference was like night and day. And then the same thing started. They were basically just shoehorning this open world game loop into every title that they owned, whether it suited it or not. And they just started putting less and less effort and creativity and imagination into it. And then Rockstar push out Red Dead Redemption 2. And it's just, that's how you should be doing it. And then CD Projekt Red with Cyberpunk 2077. As long as you weren't playing it on console. PC version was fine. I maintain that to this day. There was nothing wrong with the PC version, even on launch. I noticed one bug, but it should never have come out on console. It clearly wasn't ready for it. It took them years to get that game. I mean, the Phantom Liberty expansion. Oh, sorry. I was such a huge cyberpunk nerd as a kid. Growing up, when I was in high school, I was reading all of William Gibson's novels, Neuromancer, Count Zero. I would read all of them. I just devoured, because it was such an amazingly new idea in science fiction. And then, of course, there was the Cyberpunk 2022 role-playing game, and we loved playing that with all of my friends in high school. And then when I heard that Mike Pondsmith was getting involved in making a Cyberpunk RPG, so you knew it was going to be good, because this is the guy that created Cyberpunk, the role-playing game, and CD Projekt Red were doing it. The people that did The Witcher 3, like, shut up and take my money. To this day, I mean, yeah, I know I had a rocky launch, but still, that Red Dead Redemption 2, two of the greatest games. You can probably tell the type of game I'm into by my two choices here. But just the freedom to go anywhere, do anything, in a way that Ubisoft kind of forgot how to do after pioneering the whole thing. What can I say? It's complacency. You know, they hit their formula and then they just stop trying to innovate. And so you end up with other people picking up the torch and moving it on. This is one of the reasons why I love indie games now. Funnily enough, if you ever look at the Steam charts for the best-selling 100 Steam games of 2025, 75% are indie games. And most of
the thing that gets me at the moment is how many old games are in the top of the charts at the moment. Games like DayZ, Rust, Minecraft, Counter-Strike, Dota.
PlayerUnknown Battlegrounds is still up there.
Yep.
Despite Fortnite dominating the market, PUBG's still in there. People are still playing it.
Yep, a massive following in Asia, which is what really keeps it going, because I know it's kind of died off in more Western countries. But yeah, I enjoyed playing it. Just quickly as well, folks, I have just started a raffle where we're going to be giving away one of 8 games that are from the Humble Bundle choice membership that I get each month. 8 games: Total War, Warhammer 3, Another Crab's Treasure, No More Heroes 3, Etrian Odyssey HD, Pharaoh: A New Era, Synergy, Spin Hero, and Paleo Pines. It's going for 60 minutes. And when we draw it, I'll be drawing 8 people, and in the order that you're drawn, you'll get each game as they're listed there. So all you need to do is type !raffle and then a number between 1 to 5 of how many tickets you want to get. Yeah, too easy. Okay, so you said, whereabouts did you grow up in the UK?
Newcastle upon Tyne, up in the northeast. Well, there's a Newcastle in Australia as well.
Yes, there is.
There is, yeah. It's a fairly major city. We lived here until I was 12, and then we emigrated. My mother and my stepfather. And my father was actually, okay, here we go. My father left my mother, me, and my baby sister when I was 4. And then I never saw him. He was in the parachute regiment. He was a soldier. He wasn't a bad person. They just married. They were too young. They were both idiots. They didn't know what they wanted. He ended up getting kicked out of the parachute regiment. I'm not entirely sure why. Probably insubordination. And then he ended up joining the French Foreign Legion. Really.
Damn.
Went to Marseille, joined the French Foreign Legion. At the age of 12, we were emigrating to South Africa because my stepfather was a union shop steward. His trade was a fitter and turner, and he worked at the local Eveready battery factory. The 70s was a rough time in British industry. The unions were taking control of absolutely everything. And then when Margaret Thatcher came in 1979 with a Conservative government, she smashed the power of the unions, and that basically involved doing lots of stuff that would get you sent to prison these days, but was perfectly acceptable back in the 70s, like, for example, putting trade union members on employment blacklists. So when he took a redundancy package from the factory, he ended up not being able to get a job anywhere because he was blacklisted for being a union member. So we took a job working in South Africa for ISCOR, the South African Iron and Steel Corporation. But my mother couldn't take the kids, me and my sister, out of the country without permission of my actual father. And I hadn't seen him since I was 7 years old. I remember he turned up for my 7th birthday. My grandmother wasn't particularly pleased to see him. Gave me a birthday present and then buggered off, and then I never ever saw him again because he joined the French Foreign Legion and walked out on his current wife. So with him being out of the country legally, we didn't require to get his permission. So we then moved to South Africa. 2 years later, I found out he died while on active service. The French Foreign Legion don't disclose information, even to next of kin. They just said he'd been killed on active service in North Africa. So probably trying to suppress a revolution in Algeria or something, and ended up catching a bullet. Then South Africa for 4 years, 82 to 86, and then back to Newcastle, where apparently everybody thought I was an Australian. Because if you take a Geordie accent and you mix it with a South African accent, you get an Australian accent. Everybody thought I was from Melbourne or something.
Hey, look, I'll give you points for knowing how to say Melbourne correctly.
Well, yeah, Melbourne, Brisbane. It's not Brisbane. It's not Melbourne. No,
no,
I get it. That's the thing. Everybody in Britain thinks they know how to do an Australian accent, and they don't, because the Australians that they were used to listening to are the ones from Australian daytime soaps like Friends and Away and Neighbours, and most of those accents are like they're like BBC Australian. It's not the way Australians actually talk. But I'll tell you who can do a really, really good Brisbane accent. Gary Oldman. The actor Gary Oldman.
Yeah. Yep.
He doesn't do what everybody, g'day Bruce, let's toss a shrimp on the barbie. The stereotypical Australian accent that everybody thinks they can do, which isn't actually an Australian accent, but he nails the Brisbane accent. Is incredibly good. He's the only person I've ever seen who could do it good enough to actually fool an Australian.
I struggle to tell the difference between Australian accents myself. It always blows me away how the UK, there is such a diverse range of accents from
Yeah.
all the way down in England to Wales to Scotland. And it blows my mind that such a small island has
Yeah.
such a massive range of,
Yeah.
whereas with Australians, I struggle to tell the difference other than you could tell the more country Ocker Aussies, and then you'll get some people who seem to almost put on a bit more of a British royal accent to sound a bit more toppish as an Australian, a bit more cultured. They're the sort of people who'll say Steve Irwin was an embarrassment, and I just want to slap them for saying that.
You kind of get the same thing in America, except in very, very certain small areas where, like in New York, the different boroughs of New York, you will hear a different accent.
Yeah.
Like a Brooklyn accent isn't the same as a Manhattan accent. And then you go just like 30, 40 miles south to New Jersey, and you've got a completely different accent as well. But aside from that, once you get outside in like New York State, most of the accents are very, very similar. You have to go like 1,000 miles before the accent changes. Whereas here in Britain, you can go 20 miles and people sound like they're speaking a foreign language.
Yeah. Yeah. So going back to you as a young fella, what made you want to join the Royal Navy?
Oh, that was easy. I desperately wanted to get away from home.
Kind of why I joined the army, but yeah.
Yeah. I was like, I have to get out of here. My parents were driving me crazy, and I was driving them crazy because I was an arsehole. And the Royal Navy, because none of my family had ever been in the Navy. I had an uncle who was in the Air Force. He was a firefighter in the Air Force. I had another uncle who was in the Army Royal Catering Corps, a cousin who was in the Pioneer Corps, another uncle who was in an infantry regiment, a cousin who was in an infantry regiment. It was like Army, one in the Air Force. Nobody had ever joined the Navy. And the only reason I joined the Navy is because they were advertising. Local newspaper, the Evening Chronicle, I actually saw an advert specifically for radio operators in the Royal Navy. Now, because I was young and stupid, it never occurred to me to ask myself the question that I would ask now: why are they so desperate for radio operators? What's the catch? Why are radio operators quitting in droves so badly that they need to specifically advertise for them? So I just turned up at the recruiting office and said, I want to be a radio operator, please. Actually, the first thing I said was communications technician. I didn't know what a communications technician did. It just sounded important. And the recruiter obviously was,
he had his quotas to meet.
He had his quotas to meet. He says, well, yep. And so they never actually lie to you, but they do distort the facts. As he said, well, here's what you have to go through to become a communications technician. But if you join up as a radio operator, you can be in within 3 months. There's like an 8-month waiting list to even get in for selection as a communications technician. But as a radio operator, I could get you in within 3 months, and then you can transfer from radio operator to communications technician, because they're both basically the same thing. That sounds all right, I said, because I was young and stupid. And so that's how I ended up joining as a radio operator. And I was really, really bad at it, and I hated every second. So after 4 years of not being a very good radio operator, I said, screw this. And then I transferred to the writer branch, which I loved, and I was actually really good at. And that's where I spent the remainder of my 22 years. Loved every minute of it.
As a writer?
Yeah, it comes from, it's one of the oldest, aside from seamen, it's one of the oldest professions in the Navy, because ships would have somebody on board. They had to have somebody on board who could read and write. And that wasn't necessarily any of the officers. So they would have a rating on board who could read and write, whose job was basically be secretary for the captain, do the ship's books, assist the logistics officer, the purser, and all that with writing stuff down. And so for like 300 years, we've had a writer branch in the Royal Navy. We don't have, we kind of do have a writer branch now, but they don't call it a writer branch anymore. You'll appreciate this, being Australian Army. We have this thing that we call the Good Ideas Club. It's anytime something new gets introduced that's a terrible, terrible idea, it comes from the Bright Ideas Club. What they decided was that my branch, well, actually my department within the branch was the writer branch, and then the department was the supply department. They decided that, no, we're going to call it the logistics department now, not the supply department. Okay, fine, whatever. And And the reasoning that they gave was hilarious. They're going to change all of the branch titles. So instead of having writers, stores accountants, chefs, and stewards, now, do you know what? I've already explained to you what a writer does. So you know what a writer does. From the branch title, stores accountant, can you guess what a stores accountant does?
Accounts for the stores on the ship.
Yeah, there you go. Simple, isn't it? Blanket stackers, stores accountants. Steward.
Yeah.
Do you know what a steward does?
I actually was a steward for a little while when I was injured, and I was at the officers' mess, and it was the worst fucking job I ever had in the military.
100% agree. So you know what a steward does. What was the other one? Can you guess what a chef does? I think it's pretty obvious from the branch.
We call them fitters and turners. They fit food into a pot and they turn out shit.
We always said that the chef's course was the hardest course in the Royal Navy because nobody's ever passed it to this day.
Look, I especially after listening to Scrap Iron Flotilla, I will give actual chefs on a ship a bit of a pass because cooking.
Hell yeah.
Especially on some of this cooking on an aircraft carrier, nah, man, you should be able to turn out fucking 5-star meals. Yeah. But cooking on a small destroyer, even some of the cruisers, yeah, that would be insane. Like we went on I can't remember if it was the Tobruk or the Jarvis Bay to Somalia, and I got one shift assisting as a kitchen hand, and I got sent down to get potatoes, and I got the bucket of potatoes and then realized, hang about, how the fuck am I getting these potatoes up this ladder?
Yeah, exactly.
And it was one of the most insane things. It was like, okay, there's a whole different level to being on a ship.
Yeah.
But again, we're going off on a weave. So carry on.
So anyway, yeah. So from the branch title, chef, stores accountant, writer, steward, you know exactly what their jobs are. Well, the Bright Idea Club thought it would be much, much better to make, because they wanted to recruit, to make the logistics branch, not the supply branch anymore, we're the logistics branch now, to make us more relatable to civilians. Nobody stopped to ask why we should care. Because civilians we were all just sailors. Beyond that, they weren't interested. But in order to make us more relatable to civilians, they were going to change the branch titles. So I went from being a writer, right, in order to make me more relatable to a civilian, I went from being a writer to AB logs pers. Yeah, exactly. AB brackets.
What does it all mean,
logs,
Basil?
Yeah, AB, able seaman, able rating, brackets, logs, close brackets, logistics, open brackets, pers, close brackets, personnel. So able seaman, logistics, personnel. What job does that do? You've got writer, and then you've got logistics personnel.
People on Civvy Street would look at that and go, what the fuck is that even about? Like, that is...
I was in the Navy and I was thinking, what the fuck is that all about?
Yeah.
And that was my job. And it was the same for the others. Went from being
writer, I think they're going to have a pretty good idea of what that is. I'm
Yeah.
guessing you were just writing a lot of stuff down. That's pretty much it in a nutshell. Yeah. Yes.
Chef went from chef to AB logs CA, short for catering. That makes it more accessible to.
And someone probably got a medal for this bright idea as well.
Oh, of course. Yeah. So that was fun. Where were we going with this, by the way?
We were talking about why you joined the military and in the Navy, and how you got scammed at the recruiting office. Yeah.
But I ended up where I needed to be. And I also left at exactly the right time because they were introducing a new, because everything had to be joint all of a sudden, which basically, because the government were always saying we've got the most efficient military we've ever had. But when the government says efficient, what they mean is cheap. So they were right.
Brought to you by the lowest bidder.
Of course, yeah, we definitely had the most efficient military we had in decades. And as part of this, they were because like the Navy had their own administration system, the Army had theirs, and the Air Force had theirs. And these things had grown over the years to be exactly what the Navy needed, what the Army needed, and what the Air Force needed. And the government thought that's not efficient. You're all going to use the same thing, and it will be the worst choice for all three. It was Oracle based. Whereas previously we had this thing called PAS, Personnel Administration System, and it was Windows based. So everybody, you didn't need to go on a course to know how to use PAS because it was like using Microsoft Office. Anybody who's ever used a PC with Windows on it knows how to use Windows-based software. So you could do people's pay, people's leave without a second's training on the system. But you needed to do a 2-day course on the new system, JPA, just to find somebody, not just to locate on the system a member of your ship's company.
And how many millions of pounds did this cost them to implement? And how many millions of pounds did they lose in errors and all the rest of it?
You wouldn't believe it. I mean, they always say that Oracle actually stands for one rich arsehole called, and I can't remember his name, but the name of the guy who wrote Oracle. But it's funny. It's funny how the system that won the bid just happened to have a whole bunch of admirals and generals' wives and brothers and sisters on the as non-executive members of the board of the company that wins the contract. It's funny how that works. But here's just an example of how utterly ludicrous this system was, and it was coming in as I was retiring, so I definitely left exactly at the right time. Using the previous systems, whether that was the Air Force, the Army, or the Navy systems, if you wanted to promote somebody, so somebody they'd gone off on their professional qualifying, they'd been selected for promotion, they'd gone off on their professional qualifying course, they'd passed their professional qualifying course, they'd gone on their leadership course, they'd passed their leadership course, and then the promotion order came in. So they passed the leadership course. It's the last thing that they need to qualify in. They pass it in June, and then the signal comes out with their promotion in July. But the promotion is with effect from the date that they got the last qualification in June when they did the leadership course. So you'd have to backdate the promotion, so they'd get a whole bunch of back pay. So you would go in the PAS, you would select the person, and then you would change their rank and put the effective date in and press enter. That was how you promoted somebody in the Navy under the old system. You try to do that under JPA, and they would get the pay and the rank change probably for a week, and then it would revert back to the previous rank. And nobody knew why. That's the scary thing. It took them about 6 months to realize that what the system was actually doing was every time the unit that the person was attached to changed its status. And ships tend to change their status a lot. They're either at sea or they're not, and then they're back at sea, and then they're not. Every time that happened, you had to go back in and re-promote him.
Oh.
So I had people who'd been promoted a year ago and whose pay was still fucked up. And just remember, under the previous system, the system that the government wanted us to get rid of because it wasn't efficient, I could just change the rank, put the date that it happened, and click enter. But under this system, it would take me an entire day to do the same thing, because every time the unit that he was assigned to went to sea, the system would reset his rank. So I had to go back and do it and basically re-promote the guy 300 times in order to catch up with today's date before the system would accept it. So that's mind-bogglingly shit. But even more shit is that it took them 6 months to figure out that that's what the system was doing. We were using the system and nobody knew how it worked. In fact, when they sent us away to train on the system, the people that were teaching us how to use the system didn't know how it worked because they'd never seen it before. They were just reading from a manual. So if we didn't understand anything in the manual, there was no point in asking the instructor because the instructor didn't know. They'd only seen the manual that morning. That's just how terrible it was. Ugh.
So what was it like for you when you first joined? Again, doing the background on you, you joined right around the time of the very first Desert Storm. I was, as I was saying to you before the show, I was in Kapuka, basic training for the Australian Army when Desert Storm started, and it was pretty fucking scary, like even then, not knowing if we were going to be sending anyone over there ourselves, whereas you were actually in and fairly green still. Yeah.
It was weird. I mean, for me, that first Gulf War was 6 months of mind-numbing tedium and boredom and 10 minutes of pants-wetting, shit-scary terror.
Butt clenching,
because I was on HMS Brazen. So I flew out to join the ship, and they were actually already doing, like, Operation Desert Shield, the build-up. So they were intercepting cargo vessels suspected of smuggling stuff. They were doing boardings and searches and all that sort of thing. When I flew out to join them in Dubai, And this was Dubai back in the old days before there were any skyscrapers or anything like that.
Yeah.
It was actually quite a nice place back then. Bit rough around the edges, a real sailor's town. So they stuck me in a hotel because the ship was away. So I was in a hotel for a week with a couple of other members of the ship's company who were waiting. They'd been on courses or whatever, and they were flying back to rejoin the ship. One was a stores accountant, the other one was an aircraft engineer. Nice couple of guys. And then the ship came back in. We joined the ship, and I'm basically straight in at the deep end.
What was your role then?
I was a radio operator.
Yep.
So that was 8, basically, because the ship was in what they call defense watches. So 8 hours on, 8 hours off for 6 months. From the start, from me joining the ship to getting back after the war was over, we were in defense watches. So the ship was split into 2 watches, port watch and starboard watch. Port watch is manning all the stations, starboard watch is in bed, and then they'd swap around. And we did that for 8 months. My God, that was, boring. Really, really boring. And plus, because the task force that was out there, as far as the British were concerned, I can't even remember the name of the task force, but we had 2 frigates, 2 destroyers, and a hospital ship. HMS Ocean was the hospital ship. The 2 destroyers were HMS Nottingham and HMS Gloucester. HMS Gloucester famously shot down a Silkworm missile that had been aimed at one of the American carriers, and they say saved its ass. I'm pretty sure the close-in weapon systems wouldn't have hit the carrier, but HMS Gloucester was the one that shot it down with a Sea Dart. And then 2 Type 22 frigates. Us, HMS Brazen, and HMS London. And London was the task force command ship with the Commodore on board. So the way they were disposed was the 2 air defense destroyers were right up at the sharp end, in the northern end of the Gulf, escorting the American carrier battle group. The hospital ship, HMS Ocean, was just putting around sort of off the coast of Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, with HMS London operating as its guard ship. We, HMS Brazen, we refer to ourselves as the Combat Fruit and Veg Patrol because we were down the southern end of the Gulf, escorting merchantmen through the Straits of Hormuz. So we were as far away from the Iraqi threat as it was possible to be. It wasn't 100% completely safe because the Strait of Hormuz, on one side, you've got Saudi Arabia and Ethiopia, and on the other side, you've got some Iranians with very itchy trigger fingers who don't like the West very much. And they could have decided to kick off at any time. And they did, in fact, at one point, because they thought it would be funny, presumably, lock us up with a target acquisition radar from a Silkworm missile battery. And that caused a couple of brown trousers all around, especially since at the time, it was protocol for the Seawolf missiles, which are our missile defense systems. For some bizarre reason, I never understood why, to be locked down with the activation key kept around the belt of the weapon engineering officer, which means that, let's face it, as soon as you get locked up with the target acquisition radar, it's a fire control radar. It's like taking aim at somebody.
Mm.
You need to be able to defend yourself, like that, not wake up the weapon engineering officer and get him to the, so that changed. That policy changed right after this incident. Fortunately, the Iranians were just rattling their saber. They never actually fired at us, but it was a scary moment. But we were basically just doing this, just escorting merchantmen. And then I think a lot of people might have heard this story because there's a channel on YouTube called The Operations Room that covered the incident and actually had me on there because I was there. There was one day that the Commodore on board HMS London wanted to get a closer look at what was going on up north. It had gone from Operation Desert Shield to Operation Desert Storm at this point. So, people were actually shooting at each other. And we came up to take over escort duty on the hospital ship. So he put it off to join the 2 destroyers, and we tied ourselves to HMS Ocean's coattails. And that was the one day of the entire war that the Iraqi Air Force thought, we'll have a go. So out they came. It didn't go well for them at all. Most of their survivors decided, screw this. They flew to Iran to get out of the war. But that was the day that one of the attacks that they launched was on HMS Ocean. They were going for the hospital ship because that's the kind of scumbags they are. Here's the thing. Our Seawolf system was, are you familiar with the term OPDEF? Do they use that in the Australian
Operation?
Navy?
Yep.
Operational defect? Yeah. Our Seawolf was OPDEF. It didn't work. Well, it did work, but it had no thermal imaging capability. It was broken. We were waiting for parts. So the chances of it actually being able to shoot down an air surface missile were fairly slim, which meant that in the event of the ocean coming under missile attack, our only other option was to put ourselves in the way of the missile and take the hit for them, fire off a decoy and hope it went for the decoy, because otherwise we were taking the hit. So as a radio operator, signals are coming in all the time, and they have a different precedence, like routine, priority, immediate, and flash. So flash being like, the person that needs to see this needs to see it now. And so this flash signal comes in, and I rip it off the teleprinter and I run it through to the ops room. We were at action stations, because we were at action stations most of the time. So I didn't think anything particularly important was happening. And what would happen with the signal, this particular signal, was it had to be rushed to the ops officer in the operations room. So I rushed in. The ops room supervisor saw me coming and basically rugby tackled me to the floor. Said, "Not now." I was like, "But I've got a flash signal." "Don't care. Not now. Stand there, shut up, do nothing and wait." Because we were under missile attack at that precise moment. And a pair of Iraqi MiG-23s were closing in on HMS Ocean. And they got to within 2 minutes of missile launch range when a pair of Saudi Arabian F-15s shot one of them down. And then the other one thought, screw that, dished his missiles and ran for Iran. So like I said, 6 months of mind-numbing, repetitive, boring tedium with 10 minutes of, oh shit, we're all going to die. Oh shit, we're all going to die. And
that's was my pretty much 99% of time in the military.
Yeah.
The amount of time you're sitting around,
hurry up and wait.
Nothing. Yep, hurry up and wait. Grey coats on, grey coats off. There's so many different ways to word it. But when shit hits the fan, it's 0 to 100. But you know, it's one of those things, and you know that stuff it adds up on you mentally after a while as well.
Well, I mean, I was kind of lucky, and that was my only real shooting war. There were other shooting wars, like Kosovo, former Yugoslavia, so on and so on. And I mean, you think, yeah, but those are all land-based wars. The Navy didn't have anything to do with that. Well, funnily enough, at one point, 90 to 95% of all of the military personnel all the British military personnel in Yugoslavia were Navy, because the infantry were all Marines. All of the air cover was Fleet Air Arm. All of the medics were Queen Alexandria's Royal Naval Nursing Service and Royal Navy. The logistics were all British Royal Navy logistics. There were a couple of Air Force and Army, but most of them were Navy. And so people were getting sent out there. I was lucky enough to actually get sent down the Falklands instead of that. So dodged a bullet on that one. And then we had a whole bunch of embargo operations for various different conflicts where we weren't directly involved in the conflict, but we were intercepting people trying to smuggle weapons in and all that sort of thing. Well, that could have gone hairy, especially since I was a member of the Borden Party. Although Royal Navy Borden parties are not all they're cracked up to be. You generally wouldn't send a sailor in to board a vessel if you expected there to be resistance. It was routine boardings and inspections, then we would send our boarding party in, helicopter over, toss a rope out the side. I was actually the first one out because I was the radio operator for that in a lot of the cases. So I was usually the first one down, the first one to catch a bullet. But they would, if they expected there to be any trouble, they'd send the Royal Marines in. We'd have a Marine detachment assigned to the ship for any boarding that we thought was going to be opposed, and the Marines would go in, which in fact did happen on a couple of occasions during the lead up to the Gulf. One, I can't remember the nationality, but we did board and end up seizing one ship, and somebody decided they were going to take their chances against a Royal Marine with a fire axe. Didn't end well for the guy with a fire axe. But yeah, I mean, we got up to all kinds of things, because that's one of the things. Like in the army, I think in the US they call them REMFs, rear echelon motherfuckers. They have a term for it in the Australian army.
Pogues.
Pogues, yeah. There's no pogue on board a warship. I don't care whether your job is a Hoover pilot, you're a steward. You're a steward serving meals to the officers.
And that's what a lot of land-based soldiers forget as well, that even though you might be a REMF, at the end of the day, there's still going to be a chance that one day you might have to pick up that rifle that you just always wonder why you have to carry.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
it's a completely different kettle of fish when you're on a ship. I never understood the mentality of people who join that, because at least when I was in the infantry, I knew I had my rifle, and at the end of the day, even if it's down to the last man, I can still do something
Yes.
myself. Whereas on a ship, and
Yeah.
again, listening to the Scrap Iron Flotilla on Audible. Feel free to plug your Audible link if you wish as well, my man.
I don't think I have
But
one anymore.
you guys just it's a completely different ball game of
Yeah.
when you're on a ship. You literally, and the author and the narrator, they've done a great job of explaining that you've got your job and you've just got to focus on it. And they talk about the people down in the boiler room and shit like that. And they can hear, and they might hear explosions and shit like that, but they just got to stay focused on their job, because if they fail at their job, that has a flow-on effect to everyone else. And
Exactly.
you might only be doing the most mundane job, but you're still part of that cog. And if one cog in that machine jams up, that's that whole ship out of action.
It can be, yeah. I mean, you're right. As an infantryman, or even as anybody, you've got a rifle. Even if you're just one guy in a foxhole, or one guy sharing a foxhole with somebody else, at the end of the day, you can defend yourself.
Mm-hmm.
If you're sitting there in the aft first aid station waiting for the casualties to come in, and you hear air red, hands to action station, you're not shooting down any incoming aircraft. You cannot. Your hands, your fate is in the hands of your shipmates. But if the ship gets hit, their fate is in the hands of the first aid teams, and the first aid teams can't get to the bodies and get them out unless we've got power, so we can actually see where we're going. And unless there's water pressure, the firefighting teams. So everybody's got a job to do, no matter how minor. Somebody's got to keep the water pressure up. The electricians have got to keep the switchboards operating. If this goes down, they've got to run bypasses. Everybody has something to do that is essential at action. Even if your day job is hoovering officers' cabins, at action, everybody's important, because you're a first aider, or you're operating.
You might have
weapons,
hatches you have to
operating
shut
the
down
sensors
and stuff like that. Yeah.
And anybody can be sent in to fight fire. I mean, you've got your forward and aft damage control and firefighting stations, but people take casualties, and you need fresh bodies. So everybody has a job to do on board a warship.
Did you guys have any old hands from the Falklands on any of the ships?
Yep.
They would have been really drumming it into you guys, I imagine.
Yeah. We were down the Falklands in 2002 for the 20th anniversary commemoration events. San Carlos Water, where the landings took place. On the other side, there was a sheep shearing station. I think it was painted green. They called it the lean green. Well, I can't remember. It's where the medical facilities were. And Surgeon Commander Rick Jolly was the guy in charge. This is the guy, along with this guy called Tug Wilson, does this fantastic book series called Jack Speak, Dictionary of Naval Slanguage. Sadly, then neither of them are with us anymore. But on that side of San Carlos Water, there's this prominence called Campito Hill. And on the top of Campito Hill, there's a memorial to the Type 21 frigates that were lost because they took some hits from extraordinarily brave Argentine pilots. Who were only let down by the incompetence of their ordnance, like fuses that wouldn't go off when they were hitting ships, and so on and so on. But there's a memorial up there, and one of our leading seamen, sonar operator, Henry Cooper, he was on board HMS Ardent, which took a hit and went down. He survived, and we climbed up Campito Hill, and we cleaned up the monument up there, polished it, removed all the moss and the stuff, made it presentable, and we had a brief service up there. And it got a bit emotional for our Henry. Also, while we were down there, this was another story. It's amazing. I don't know if you heard, there was the commanding officer of the parachute regiment, Lieutenant Colonel H. Jones, got himself a Victoria Cross posthumously for charging an Argentine trench and getting himself machine gunned. This all took place for the Battle of Goose Green. He was on overall charge, and his plan was a bit complex. It had 6 different phases. I mean, he'd obviously never heard of the saying, keep it simple, stupid. So when the plan inevitably ran into opposition and started bogging down, he started to get a bit antsy and started, instead of staying back and like taking overall command and leaving it to his majors and captains to execute his instructions, he went around personally, which was brave of him, I suppose, but it's not the colonel's job, personally taking charge. One of the places where he had to take charge was in some of the trenches. They'd run into some trenches that they hadn't realised were there, and it was 2 para. Was it 2 para? Let's say it was 2 para. I can't remember the specific battalion. But they'd run into some well-defended trench lines with machine guns, and they'd taken a lot of casualties, and they weren't near their objective. And we were on this battlefield tour of the place, and it's the spot exactly where Lieutenant Colonel Jones got himself shot. And we were being given this battlefield tour by the resident infantry company down the Falklands at the time, which was the 3rd Battalion Parachute Regiment, 3 para. And we were given this tour by the company's Major Tom Abel. And he was taking us over where it all happened, and he told us, because he'd seen it, because 20 years earlier, he wasn't Major Tom Abel of 3 para, he was Corporal Tom Abel of 2 para, so he was there. And he saw Colonel Jones running off on his own initiative and charging a trench without anybody backing him up, trying to play the hero and getting himself shot by the other trench that he hadn't bothered to ask was actually the thing that was slowing them down. So he basically got himself killed, and of course was given a Victoria Cross, because you've got to have a hero. And to this day, you can stand where they'd set up the Jimpies and just dumped all of their rounds of link. To this day, you can just go up and just kick the ground, and you'll scatter 7.62mm link all over the place. It was that thick with the suppressive fire they were putting down to try to keep these trenches down. And as he's telling us these stories, we're all a bunch of sailors, and we're like, they're pale-faced at like just the carnage that they went through. And I said, you know, sir, I think I speak for everybody here when I say we have absolutely no idea how you soldiers do the job you do. And he turned around to me and he said, you know what? It's funny you should say that. But as we were sitting, getting hammered by these suppressive fire from these Argentine machine guns in the trenches over there, all we could hear, aside from the machine guns shooting at us, was the bombs hitting the ships out in San Carlos Harbor and the tracer going up. And we were sitting to ourselves thinking, you know, we're in the shit here, but at least we can defend ourselves. I've got a rifle. Yeah. I don't know how those sailors can do the job that they do. So it's different, but it's the same.
It is. Getting back onto one of the focuses of what my interviews have been about of late, and that's talking about the mental impact of it. And it's something that I try to stress to people in that when you were talking about how when you were deployed to the Gulf, and I only had one deployment myself, and that was to Somalia in 1993. And one of the things that I try to get across to people is I love I love talking about the military stuff, but I've also been doing some interviews with other first responders. And something I try to get across to people is that you'll see there's a lot of respect given to military people, and even ambulances and that. But the one that I've been trying to get across to people as well is about law enforcement officers, and they witness I wouldn't say on a daily basis. Daily, a lot of that sort of stuff might just be average run of the mill, pulling someone over for speeding or something like that. But I doubt there's a month or two goes past where they're not attending something horrific. Yeah. And when we're on a deployment, like I was in Somalia for five and a bit months. And the whole time I was there, I was in country, I was with the lads. The whole time you were away on your ship in Desert Storm, you were with the rest of the lads on the ship, and you can come down from that. When the deployment ended, you had a couple of weeks at least of sailing back to the UK, I guess. So you're coming down off of that. These people who do those sorts of jobs.
I had 22 years and I only had 10 minutes in the shit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, as you say, 10 minutes that you can put your hand in your heart and say, I definitely earned my pay for that 10 minutes. But for the rest of that time, and with something like a naval ship as well, plus there's also the training factor, because I've lost I lost more mates to training than I
Yeah.
did. We only lost one guy in Somalia, and that was sadly through a friendly fire incident. But I had a mate blown up by hand grenades that were faulty, that were literally in his pack. Standing 2 meters behind him was one of my best mates, who was the safety officer. And obviously, there's nothing a safety officer can do about grenades just going off in someone's hip. And he got covered head to toe in my other mate. And yeah, these are the sorts of things you have. But what people need to remember is that, yeah, it's not even just for first responders, but anyone who works in those sort of industries where you may encounter the dark side of humanity.
Yeah.
At least with military people, we have that chance to de-stress. But I've been trying to get across to people a lot more of, yep, there are bad police, but there are a lot of good police.
Yeah.
And you've got to understand for these people that they're dealing with shit on a regular basis, and then they've got to go home. I've got a good mate who's a cop, and I said to him, how do you deal with it? And he goes, you just bottle it down. I've got to go home, and after I've just been to a car crash or a rape or something like that, and my wife's going to be telling me about something mundane, and in my mind, I'm still picturing the car crash I just saw with the dead kids and all the rest of it.
And it can happen
insane.
any day. You never know. You turn up for work each day, and each day could be the worst day you've ever had, or it could be completely boring and dull and routine. But it could be the worst day you've ever had, and that's every day.
They go from a 0 to 100. And the reason I was bringing it up was like what you said with when you were talking to the major at Goose Green, and he said, he was thinking of you guys, for the ship or for the Navy guys during the Falklands, and sitting there. You guys said to him, we can't imagine what you guys go through. And he says, I can't imagine what you guys go through.
Yeah.
No matter how bad things are, there's always someone else who maybe not has it worse than you, but has a completely different but equally traumatic experience.
Yes.
And it's so impactful. And that's one of the things I love about gaming is it's one of those things there you could just, like for me, it's a case of switch off. And I could just focus on sailing my silly ship around or running around in my silly game, DayZ or Rust, whatever I'm playing, and just switch off and just immerse myself and just forget about all that sort of shit. Is that part of the reason why you've stayed with gaming all this time?
It's one of the reasons. And there are actual gaming charities that actually do this to help veterans cope with combat stress. I wish I could remember the name.
There's Regiment, it's an American one, Regiment OG or something like that.
There's
Operation Supply Drop is another one that does. Theirs is quite good. They go out to the combat zones and they'll drop off consoles and that, so the lads can just sit down. One of the ironies, though, that I love is that guys who you would think have had more than their fair share of warfare gravitate towards, like, particularly the sort of games that I love to play, DayZ, Armor, these shooter games and all the rest of it. And a lot of people can't understand it. But you seem to like those sorts of games as well. Those open world ones where, for me, and I've got a mate who, King Alex, he's a former UK sniper. And I asked him, why do you like, I've done an interview with him as well. And he said, it's the closest you can get to what I used to do. Because you still get that adrenaline rush.
I'll tell you what, I used to play a lot of airsoft when I was younger. I don't do it anymore because I'm old and fat and I'm crap. I'm no longer have the chassis built for.
We're not allowed to have airsoft guns in Australia. They're too scary, apparently.
Anyway,
but we can have real guns, but we can't have airsoft guns.
Yeah. Well, anyway,
you guys are the opposite of us.
On my airsoft team, there was, we'll call him Dave, just to keep his identity. Dave was British Army. He was, I think at the time, he was a medic working at Royal Hospital Hounslow. Hadn't always been a medic, though. Prior to rebadging as a medic, he'd been what they call a scalyback in the army, a radio operator, signalman, roll chorus signals. They call them scalybacks because they've got this Klansman radio on their back, so the back gets covered in sweat and turns all scaly.
We call them handbags in Australia.
Okay, so that's why they call them scalybacks. So he'd been Royal Signals. But he'd been Royal Signals attached to the Parachute Regiment because Parachute Regiment do not have their own engineers, mechanics, signals, cooks. Other army corps will provide personnel to the parachute regiment, but they all have to pass P Company. So they've basically got to undergo the same training that the parachute regiment does. They have to qualify for the parachute regiment before they can work with them. So they're all entitled to wear the red beret. And Nick had done that, and I just gave his name away. It's all right, fine.
There's a million Nicks.
There's millions of Nicks around. Nick had done all of that. So we all knew that he was in the British Army and he had a history with the parachute regiment. Nick picked me up one day to take me to play airsoft. We stopped off at his house because he needed to feed his dog, Gibson. And he had this cork board up on the wall with various different photographs from his military career pasted up. And there was 2 photographs in particular that I saw and thought, hang on a minute, I'm minuten bitter. The first one was a picture of Nick in a jungle somewhere, covered in mud, big shit-eating grin on his face, having the time of his life, big Freddie Mercury 1970s porn star moustache because, you know, British Army, and he had an M16. I thought, there's only 2 units in the British Army that routinely carry M16s in operation, and I know Nick was in the Paris. Well, SBS isn't the British Army regiment, but yeah, I see where you're going. One's the Pathfinders, which are paratroopers, but I know Nick wasn't in that. And the other one was the Special Air Service Regiment. So I thought, okay. And then I saw another photograph. And this was Nick and a whole bunch of other guys, all wearing sand-coloured berets, standing in a line in the middle of the desert with Lieutenant General Sir Peter de la Billière pinning medals on their chests. Now, he was the guy in charge of the British Army during the First Gulf War. And he had also previously been the commanding officer of the Special Air Service Regiment. And there's only 2 units in the British Army that wear sand-coloured berets. And I know Nick wasn't in the Logistics Corps. So when the former commander of the Special Air Service Regiment decides he personally wants to award medals to a bunch of people in Desert Storm wearing sand-coloured berets who use M16s on operations, it doesn't take much for me to figure out exactly what Nick used to do when he was in the Army. And he played airsoft for fun. So, yeah, weird. You would have thought that would have been the last thing that he wanted to do, but no, he absolutely loved it. He just got such a kick out of it.
I always love that saying. Is it Ernest Hemingway? Those who have hunted man will know no greater thrill. I'm not sure if that's Ernest Hemingway, but I've heard that one before, and I know I didn't get it quite right. But there's something to it. You know, it's one of the reasons why I love playing a game like DayZ, because it still gives me that thrill of.
Because that's the thing about DayZ. It's supposed to be a game where it's you against the zombies, but it isn't. The zombies are just there to distract you from the real things that are going to kill you, because you're getting hunted, and it's not by the zombies. That thrill of knowing.
It's a game that I like because as an older guy whose reflexes, you know, I don't have the reflexes of a 12-year-old kid who's had 10 cans of Red Bull, but I am still a little bit smarter than the average bear. So I can still sometimes, I just get let down by my terrible hand-eye coordination with mouse and keyboard. But, it's one of those things that attracts me to those sorts of games. I can't handle your Call of Duty lobbies and stuff like that anymore. And but no, there's something about the attraction. And I love the fact that this guy, he'd done pretty much what would be considered almost the penultimate thing you can do in the British military, and he never made a big deal about it. And I hate the people who talk up their it's like the stolen valors. Why don't they ever claim to be a cook? They always go for the most insane, crazy, and the easiest ones to shoot down.
And what's wrong with being a cook anyway?
Exactly.
I mean, it's a hard job. I mean, you know,
we used to treat them like royalty. The cooks, the company clerk, and the Q store people. You look after them. Those 3 were the most important people, because if you looked after them, when I was in mortar platoon in the army, we'd bring the cooks out and let them drop a couple of bombs down, and we knew that night we were getting the best fucking meal that they had.
Yeah, exactly.
We were the first ones to have their food sent out so it'd still be nice and hot. And it was so funny as well, watching them drop a mortar round down the tube, because they never got to do that sort of shit. And I remember myself, probably, did they ever let you go up and load the guns and things like that every now and then?
Every now and then, yeah. In fact, it was
And
kind of encouraged to understand exactly what all of your other shipmates did. So you go down the engine rooms, just so you could see where, not just so you could see where all the firefighting equipment was in case you ever had a fire down there, where all the hazards were, a lot of hazards in an engine room, and where all the escape exits were. But just to give you an appreciation for what your shipmates did. So you'd end up, whenever you would duty watch on a day, you'd either have a fire exercise or you'd have a lecture, which would be down the engine rooms, getting to see what the engine rooms actually look like, so you know what the engineers do, and you know what the place looks like before the first time you go in is actually having to fight a fire. And we'd have people come into the communications office, and we'd show them, where all the, because there's some really nasty fire hazards in there with a lot of the stuff in a radio. You can get some extremely nasty gases get given off by some of the stuff in there.
lithium batteries and stuff like that. Yeah.
So all of the radio panels have got like these nozzles in them, so you can basically just take a CO2 fire extinguisher and stick the probe into that nozzle and drench the internals of the radio. There's all kinds of stuff like that, but it gives you an appreciation for, it's all well and good to know what your job is, but it doesn't hurt if you know and understand what everybody else's jobs are and what their place of work is and what the hazards are in those different places of work, because it just makes you a more useful member of the ship's company.
Yep. What made you get into YouTube?
Oh, that was almost completely an accident. So I was playing World of Tanks. Funny old thing. I'd read about World of Tanks before it was even before there was anything that you could play, and an article in PC Gamer, and I thought, oh, that sounds interesting, and then completely forgot about it because it wasn't until like 2 years later before the game actually came out in beta form. And then I was on Facebook one day, and those little banner ads, those side ads that run. It was advertising World of Tanks, and I thought, I remember that. And so that's the only time in my life I have ever clicked on a YouTube advert, not YouTube, a Facebook advert. And that's how I ended up starting to play World of Tanks. But the thing is, World of Tanks and World of Warships obviously has this replay system where if you have it saves the replay of every battle that you play. And so if I had a particularly good game, which actually happened quite a bit back in the day, I wasn't as crap as I am now, you could upload those replays to these private replay hosting sites, so that you could always have that rather than trying to fill up your hard drive with all these replays. You could upload them to these third-party sites. The problem was a lot of these places, they were free hosting until they started getting popular, and then the server demand meant that they could no longer afford to keep hosting the replays because suddenly the people renting them the servers were like, whoa, you too much traffic, we need to start charging you for this. So all of these third-party sites would eventually collapse under the weight of their own popularity, and I'd lose all of my replays. And this was before there was an official replay hosting site hosted by Wargaming. And so I was trying to come up with a way of saving my favorite and best games. And I thought, well, this YouTube thing doesn't seem like it's going anywhere. It's not going away the way these third-party replay hosting sites are. So if I were to, rather than the replay file itself, if I record a video of the battle, I can upload the video to YouTube, and then it's there forever. And then people started watching them and said, well, you want to put a commentary on these? And so I started doing that, and the rest is history.
Were you a fan of history?
Always have been.
Yep.
Always. I was a massive history nerd when I was a kid. It started off with the kind of things that kids are interested in: dinosaurs, Greek mythology, monsters, the Kraken, the
Roman Empire,
Roman Empire, Greek mythology in particular, and dinosaurs were awesome. And so I would just consume content, books mostly, on Greek mythology and dinosaurs and stuff. So I've always been a massive history nerd. And then it became, for some reason, I don't know how, I suddenly got this interest in, I'll tell you why. I suddenly got this interest in military equipment. And it was probably because I grew up in the 80s, member of Generation X. And we were convinced that we're all going to die in a nuclear holocaust.
Yes.
We thought, you know, that's just what is going to happen. Eventually, the bombs are going to fall, and we're all going to die. So, nobody in my generation ever had any expectation of living beyond the age of 30. We just thought we were all going to die in a nuclear war. And I just got interested in the kind of things that were going to kill me. And so I started collecting books and reading stuff about military equipment and aircraft, tanks. That's where my interest in it all started.
I'm actually wearing a classic
80s
military shirt.
I don't know if you noticed.
Hard
That's
Rock
actually
Cafe.
the year we're born, isn't it?
I was a 73 boy.
73. Oh, okay, because that's the Hard Rock Cafe opened in New York, year after I was born. Sorry, I thought there's only 1 year between us.
Yeah, there is, but I'm 1 year younger. You're my senior, sir.
Yeah, I was 70, 73. Oh, I suppose I was born right at the beginning of 70, and you were probably
so you're born in 1970.
Yeah, I'm 55. You're 50.
Oh shit!
You must be 53.
Fuck me, I'm that old. I'm forgetting how old I am. I'm 52.
I thought something was off there. The maths didn't add up because I was born right at the beginning of 70.
I'm kind of retarded.
Yeah, don't worry. Once you get over 50, everything gets more complicated.
Who are you again?
Don't know. That's the thing. I can remember every minute of Queen's performance at Live Aid in 1985, but I cannot remember whether or not I took my pills this morning.
Brother, I almost forgot my nighttime ones. Hey, Friendly lads, thank you so much for the raid. Friendly, a much better quality DayZ podcast than I ever did back in the day. They're as ugly as a handful of arseholes. They're a couple of British lads, Dave and Andy, but I fucking love them to death. They're the nicest guys ever, and they've got a great sense of humour as well. So I've got a great relationship with them. We just take the piss out of each other all the time. But they do a really high quality show. If you have any interest in DayZ at all, I highly recommend checking out the Friendly DayZ podcast, folks. You'll love it. They're just a couple of good, funny lads. They've got a great chemistry, which is kind of conducive to what we were segueing to, which is about you and your YouTube channel. In that, like we said, I think at the beginning that, or it might have been before we started streaming that, but you yourself admitted not the greatest player of predominantly World of Tanks doesn't really interest me that much. I like the War Thunder for the tank battles. I think War Thunder is better,
a lot more realistic in War Thunder.
But War Thunder's naval side is pretty terrible, when World of Warships is much better in that aspect. But where you set yourself apart is and pretty much being the pinnacle of the World of Warships content creator community is with the style of your videos, because at the end of the day, you're doing something fairly basic. You're getting a video that someone sent to you and you're just playing it again. But you've managed to create this market and this whole community of, like, I think the last video you had was Notza. And
yes.
You were talking about doing a Notza. I would argue that a Jingles moment is more famous in the World of Warships community than doing a Notza.
Well, that's only because Notza hasn't been around for about 5 years. Seriously, back in the day, pulling a Notza, everybody knew what that meant. And everybody knew what a Jingles landing was, but that didn't come from World of Warships. So, I mean, that was from War Thunder, funnily enough. Although I did at one point in Cold Waters manage to pull a Jingles landing in the submarine, which was legendary. It's how I recovered from it that was the legendary part. Do you ever hear about that one?
No.
Okay, so we're playing Cold Waters, which is a submarine simulator. And I'm in some submarine, and I've taken a torpedo hit, and the sub was flooding. And we ended up bottoming out on the seabed. Here was the problem. You had pumps, and the pumps were working. We hadn't lost electrical power, but we couldn't pump the water out because we were so deep. The water pressure couldn't be overcome by the pumps. But we still had electrical power, still had engines. I couldn't pump enough water out to float the ballast tanks, so we couldn't get back to the surface. So we're all going to die. Unless... So I Jingles landing the submarine, but I managed to recover because we were on a very, very narrow ocean shelf, a very narrow incline ocean shelf, with the back end of the submarine pointing up this shallow slope. So I thought, well, I still have engine power. So if I could just drag the submarine up the slope of this ocean shelf, maybe I can get it to a sufficient depth where the power of the pumps can overcome the water pressure. So this took about 20 minutes of dragging the submarine up this shelf at about 3 knots. And then suddenly the pumps started working when I was about 50 meters short of the top of this incline. And then it was downhill again the other side. But I just managed to get the sub to the depth where the pumps could overcome the external water pressure. I managed to get enough water out that I could float the ballast tanks, that I could get to the surface and limp home. And unfortunately, that video died. It was one of the most popular videos I ever did. And it died because I used copyrighted music.
Someone actually referenced another series you did as well, which I'm guessing was your take on that classic Ricky Gervais series with An Idiot Abroad. But you called yours A Gnome Abroad.
Oh, yes.
And someone said they miss it, but they're guessing you had to remove it due to copyright as well.
I'm not sure about those, actually. Let me have a quick look. Because that was basically, I went to the USA. I had an amazing holiday. I went to the Dayton Air Show. I went to the National Museum of the U.S. Air Force. Amazing if you ever get the chance to go. And then what I ended up doing was a whole bunch of, like, you remember Adam Richman, Man versus Food?
Yep.
I ended up doing a whole bunch of gnome versus food things. I went to a bunch of the places in the sort of Ohio area that he had gone to and went and did the same food challenges that he did, and failed miserably because holy shit, some of those sandwiches were just, oh God, it's like the size of a baby's head. But I'm pretty sure. Let me just do a quick gnome versus food. Yeah, some of those videos are still up. Schmidt's Sausage House, Son of Thurman, BD's Mongolian Barbecue, and the Ohio Deli, where they have this sandwich called the Dagwood. It's based on a cartoon. Honestly, this sandwich has got like 3 pounds of meat in it. It's no way you're ever finishing it. But yeah, those are still up. The roaming there's some. Wow, the roaming gnome burger challenge. All right, that one's not me. But those videos are still up, so you can still search for them, and they are still there. That's good to know. Oh, I'd hate to think that those have been lost. Oh, that's good news.
But yeah, so you ended up finding people just started watching your content that you were just uploading for posterity. And then, so what were you actually doing in the real world at that time?
I was still in the Navy.
Yep.
But I was in the last couple of years of service. So I was getting too old. My last ship was HMS Manchester, and I hated it every second. There was nothing wrong with the ship. There was nothing wrong with the ship's company. I was just too old. And I joined it in the middle of a Pacific South American deployment in summer. Oh, God. See, this is why I could never go to Australia. It's just too hot. I'm all right in the cold, but I can't handle the heat. And it nearly killed me. And I was like, oh, this is a young man's game. I'm getting too old for this shit. My final job in the Navy was working at the Admiralty Interview Board, which was perfect, because that's where all Royal Marine, Royal Navy, and Royal Navy Reserve officers or potential officer recruits go for selection. You've got to pass the Admiralty Interview Board. And then if you pass that, they will send you on to Britannia Royal Naval College, for example, to become a Royal Navy officer. But you've got to pass the AIB.
What rank were you at this time?
At that time, I was still an AB, like I suppose Lance Corporal equivalent. I was passed for promotion for leading rate, and I'd been a leading rate, but only local, what they call local acting. I don't know if you probably have something very similar in the Australia, where you wear the rank and you get paid, but you're not actually that rank. You're just filling in because there's a space available and it needs to be filled. Do you have something like that?
It's just acting corporal.
Acting corporal, yeah. I was an acting leading rate because I was passed for promotion. I'd done the qualifying course. I was professionally qualified, but I refused to do the leadership course because it's basically 6 weeks of PT, and fuck that. I was too old. Didn't want to do it. So I stayed as an AB my entire 22 years, aside from a couple of years as an acting leading rate. So I was still an AB when I was at the Admiralty Interview Board. And we were basically doing these practical leadership tests that people had to complete, or they didn't have to complete them, because seeing how somebody handles failure is also an important part of knowing whether or not they'll make a decent officer. But we'd set the tests up for them, and then they would be assessed on how well they completed it and how well they led their team through the test. Everybody get a chance at leading, and so on and so on. So it's how well you can lead, and also how good a follower you can be, because that can be quite an important part as well. Anyway, which meant that basically I've got to go home every night and play games every night. So my last 2 years, it was literally I was a 10-minute walk away from work, so it was ideal. It was basically working a 9-to-5 job, which is something that you very rarely get the opportunity to do in the military. And so that was my last 2 years, and that's when I started doing the whole YouTube thing. If I'd been anywhere else in the Navy, I would have never been able to do it. But it all started while I was still in the military, and it was kind of the timing was great for me. Honestly, I just kind of got so incredibly lucky. It wasn't through. It's like, I never had any business plan. I never said, right, this is what I'm going to do. I need to achieve this by that date. I need to make sure that this happens. It just kind of happened organically, because I started doing it in my last, say, 18 months before I actually finished my 22 years and left the Navy, which meant that I had just enough of a viewer base. Didn't have a lot. Only had like a couple of thousand, 2,000, 3,000, something like that. Small channel. And the ad revenue from that was not enough to live on by any stretch of the imagination. But because when I left the Navy, I got an immediate pension because I'd done the full 22 years.
Yep.
And that was like $750 a month. That plus the YouTube ad revenue was just about enough that I don't need to get a job. I can do this and see how it goes. And it went well enough because I had the World of Tanks thing, the audience for that, and then War Thunder came out, and I very quickly became the number one War Thunder YouTuber. I'm not anymore, not even close. But because I had the World of Tanks audience, I was instantly the War Thunder YouTuber with the biggest audience, because I had my World of Tanks audience watching my War Thunder videos. And so anytime you did a search for a War Thunder video, I was the number one search result. Not because I was so good at War Thunder, although I was pretty good, but because I just had the biggest audience. So I had the most views, which meant that people who were looking at War Thunder were seeing me first. And then as a result of that, I was attracting more and more subscribers. And then they were seeing all the World of Tanks stuff. And it just it was right place, right time. Wasn't because I was doing anything particularly great. I was just in the right place at the right time. And the War Thunder success fed off the World of Tanks success. And then I very quickly went from a couple of thousand subscribers to 50,000 subscribers. And there's a kind of critical mass that you get on YouTube with the algorithm, where once you have enough views, once you pass a certain threshold, YouTube starts recommending you more and more at the end of other people's videos. And just the timing, everything just came together at the exact right time in order to propel me from like 5,000 subscribers to 150,000 subscribers in the space of about 6 months. It wasn't because I was doing anything especially innovative or entertaining. I was just right time, right place, had the built-in audience, covering the right thing, not because I'd planned to do it. It's just that seems interesting. I'll cover that. And
I think you're being a bit self-deprecating there, though, mate. Because at the end of the day, there was probably a dozen minimum other channels all doing the same, but you were doing something in a format that resonated with people. And there was even a comment on the Reddit thread. Someone was rather. It got downvoted to fuck, but that's Reddit at times. But someone said he's a nice guy, but he doesn't know how to play the game anymore, blah, blah, blah. And someone said, we don't watch, like you said to me before the show, we don't watch jingles to learn how to play. We watch jingles to be entertained.
Exactly.
And it's one of those things. Sometimes you just like to put a video on and not have to pay too much attention to it. Just listen to some, funny it's kind of why I only get a handful of people watching me and my videos, but it doesn't bother me because those who do, I'm looking at the names that have been popping up in chat, and they're the same people I recognize all the time, and they like what I do, and they like the way that the show goes, and it works for me. I even within DayZ, I'm one of the smallest DayZ channels, but I got invited to Prague a couple of years back for an event by the developer team, along with some of the biggest names, just because of my status. You don't need to be at the top. You've just got to be making a decent contribution, and the people will keep on watching it. And I focus on long form content, which doesn't really gel with a lot of the younger generation. They like the short form and quick ADHD sort of stuff. But I prefer the longer form. That's one of the reasons I like watching your videos. They're all generally around about 15 to 20-minute mark, which is a nice bite. But you can go and watch the shorts and the TikTok reels and all the rest of it. But I'm not really into that. I like a bit more of an engaging thing with a bit of a story and something to keep me occupied. And but you're being very self-deprecating, basically saying, just like you did, come out of the bucket with a tit in your mouth and not a thumb. But no, you put yourself in the right place and put your branding style on it, and it resonated. So
I'll tell you one thing, and it was a comment because I normally don't put a video out on a Sunday, but there's this game from your neighbours over in Wellington, in New Zealand.
Yep.
It's a side-scrolling zombie game called Into the Dead, and because I'm famously I'm crap at being games, so you don't have. I'm famous for being crap at games, so you don't have to, and so on. But I'm actually a little better than you might think. And somebody know I'm going to read you this comment. So I've been putting this video playthrough of this game Into the Dead up for the last couple of weeks, and somebody said, after watching Jingles play this, I thought that looks fun, so I bought it. Then I managed to get Penny killed twice. I got 2 deep wounds. She survived and is currently having nightmares. Jingles isn't as crap as he says he is.
if you like those sorts of games, I don't know whether you already have, but you should try Project Zomboid.
Oh, I've seen that. Yeah, who was it? I see somebody playing that quite often. The Russian. What was it? The Russian Badger? No.
Yep.
Something Hedgehog. Soviet Womble. He plays Project Zomboid. He's hilarious.
He is a legend.
He is also way less shit than he makes himself out to be. He's actually really, really good. But his stuff is legendary. Funny. All his DayZ stuff.
Yes. He's phenomenal. What was I just about? There was another game I was going to suggest here. The Long Dark.
That's really good.
That is one of the most graphically beautiful games, and it's a classic example of, with the right art style, you don't need to. One of the reasons why I still play DayZ, even though it's so old, is it's still one of the most realistic looking games in its genre out there, by comparison to most other games. Rust, I'm really enjoying Rust at the moment. It's got some great mechanics in it, but it's very arcadey looking by comparison. But
that's why you get
Long Dark, that almost Samurai Jack style artwork that they have in it, it just nails that format, and it's such a beautiful game. And Vane is one I want to check out as well. Paddy Melton chat there.
You get games like Guild Wars 2. It's looked the same for 15 years, and it still looks amazing because it doesn't try to be realistic. It's got this very stylized. Yeah, exactly. Perfect example. It doesn't try to look realistic. It's got its own style, and it looks as fresh as the day it was launched. That's why you get games like Age of Conan, which at the time it came out was being hailed as being the most graphically realistic game of all time. And within 6 months of coming out, it looked out of date because new generation of graphics cards came out. You try to push for graphical realism, and it's only as good as the year the game came out.
Yeah. Cyberpunk's another good one. They went for a that dystopian sort of art style to it, and it worked.
The design of the city in that game was just I mean, the Night City in that game was as big a character as Johnny Silverhand or V or any of the others. The city was just incredible. Could quite happily spend an hour of my time just driving around Night City with the radio playing, not doing any quests, not doing anything, just driving around and taking in the atmosphere. Because did the same thing in Red Dead Redemption 2.
I was about to say Red Dead, yeah.
Just jump on a horse and go for a ride. Maybe do a bit of hunting, maybe shoot some pigeons, maybe do some fishing, and not follow any of the quests or any of the plot. Just go out and see the world. There's so few games where you can actually do that. And yeah,
Skyrim's another one that was good for that.
Yeah.
Yep.
Just the world building. You take the time to do that, like Rockstar do with the Grand Theft Auto games. Another prime example. Yeah, Grand Theft Auto 6 just got postponed another 6 months.
Yes,
right after the
next
Take-Two
year.
CEO said he was very, very convinced that there would be no further delays. And then 2 months later, they've announced another 6-month delay. But I mean, delaying a game isn't bad. Make sure you get it right. I'd far rather play a game 6 months later that's good than play something that's dog shit on release because they were trying to hit a release date deadline.
I love the format you have with your channel, though. You've got one of the greatest tips for people, and I'm my own worst enemy. Again, for me, this is just purely a hobby, something I do to share stories and all the rest of it. I don't do this as a business per se, but for people who are doing it for a business, one of the tips that I give them is, you've got to have that structure. And I'll even see you apologize when you miss your regular upload. You'll put a post in your community tab, but everyone knows each week from Jingles, you're going to get a World of Tanks video, you're going to get a World of Warships video, and then you're going to get whatever other game is catching your eye at that time. And at the moment, you said it's Into the Dead. And that is
Kingdom Come Deliverance 2. Those are the two.
Sorry, Kingdom Come Deliverance 2. Yeah. That is such a great thing for people. Again, you don't stream. You said you did try it, but it just didn't feel natural. And honestly, for people who are looking to start their own channels, YouTube is a much better form of revenue than Twitch will ever be. Twitch, especially with all the drama going on that platform at the moment, but it is, they're very, very different ecosystems.
The one thing I would say in favor of Twitch is that you can always, if you have a particularly good stream, you can always clip highlights and then release that as a YouTube video.
Trendless does that. Trendless is very good at doing that.
Yes. But you have to have good streams. And that was the reason why I just couldn't do Twitch, because a lot of people, you can be having the worst RNG, the worst teammates, and you're just not having fun. But you've got to plaster the smile on, soldier on through, or you don't. You don't have to pretend you're having fun. You can end up swearing and cursing at the stream. And there are audiences for that sort of thing, but I never wanted to be that person, and I couldn't pretend I was having fun when I wasn't.
Flemu.
So
that's kind of Flemu's thing. I watched one of your replays of him, the angry Croat. Sorry, Paddy just reminded me. You do have one other show each week as well, and it is exactly what you appreciate when streamers stay in communication with their viewers. How could I forget Mingles with Jingles?
Yes, I recorded tomorrow's episode just before I joined this stream, and it's basically it's all about games developers or games publishers being complete and utter arseholes. It's mostly Take-Two this time around. Have you noticed? What was it? Take-Two, Rockstar just fired 30 developers for gross misconduct. Did you hear about that one?
No.
Yeah, they got rid of the number they've given is 30. It's slightly more than 30, maybe 32, maybe 33. But they fired them for gross misconduct, which nobody has actually specified exactly what gross misconduct entails, but sources have indicated that they've been giving away game development secrets, and they've all been sacked for it. And I'm sure it's just a 100% complete coincidence that the exact same people who all got fired for gross misconduct got fired for gross misconduct less than a week after management found out they were attempting to unionize. I'm sure those two events are completely unrelated. So yeah, Take-Two and Rockstar in the headlines for all the wrong reasons lately.
There's not a lot of gaming companies at the moment that are showering themselves with glory. It's yeah, it's really sad, the state of gaming at the moment, isn't it?
This is why I love indie games.
Mm-hmm.
And this is why if you look at the top 100 games on Steam, 80% are independent titles. And the ones that are from AAA publishers are games that are 10 years old that people are just still playing, because all of the recent games from AAA developers are dog shit. I mean, Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League, Skull and Bones, the world's first quadruple A title. The list goes on and on and on. They're just, nobody's taking chances in the AAA development. And I can understand why. With games costing, $100, $200 million, nobody wants to take a chance. But if you're just trotting out the same shit every year, I mean, it's almost like the games industry is becoming a parody of like the Electronic Arts FIFA football game.
Yeah,
you're paying the same, you're paying premium price for the same game every year, just with a different number at the end of it. And that's what Ubisoft have been doing for the last 10 years. That's what Activision have been doing for that. They're just recycling the same game, just with a different number at the end of it every year, and there's no sense of innovation. And if you want to get stuff that's interesting and unique to play, you have to look in the indie market, or the smaller developers, the non-AAA, people who self-publish, or they have smaller publishing deals. Stuff like games from Team 17 rather than Electronic Arts. Or people who self-publish on Steam and who have no advertising budget, and they just get their stuff noticed because of word of mouth and great Steam user reviews. Things like Pacific Drive, Deck of Haunts, Astrometica, The Alters. RV There Yet? Have you heard of that one?
no.
Hilarious. It's called RV There Yet, as in recreational vehicle. And you basically drive a Winnebago around these national parks in America, trying to get from one end of the park to the other. And there's all kinds of physics challenges you got to get around and work together. It's a co-op game, and it's hilarious. And no AAA publisher was ever going to give the green light for something like this. It's like, who's going to want to play that? You'd be amazed who wants to play it. You just have to publish it and find out.
Yeah. No, you're definitely on the money there with some of the smaller companies. Like one of the ones that I love, Schilling, is a legend of DayZ, Dean Hall, and his Icarus game, which it's just about to be released to console, and he still does his own thing. And he set up his own company in New Zealand, and he's just doing his thing. And there's a lot of people still butthurt that he left DayZ and went off to climb Mount Everest. Get over it, folks. The guy made bank. I'm happy for him. He had a great idea, and he inspired a generation, and the impact that he had on this genre of gaming is insane. The amount of stuff, even Brendan Green counts Dean Hall as an inspiration for him going on to make PUBG. But at the same time, it's also a cautionary tale of what happens when your idea gets taken over by someone else, and you just look at what Bluehole did to PUBG. And it's kind of one of the things I wanted to chat with you about, because we're on the game dev side of things, is the games that you're most known for, World of Warships, World of Tanks, and War Thunder, and that. And we're seeing it more and more now, these freemium styles of games with it's like your commentary, and the fact that you quit the creator club with Ouija back in the day for the little white mouse debacle, which was just absolutely
that was just the straw that broke the camel's back. I mean, it had been going badly, because these at the start, they need you, the influencer. They want them. It's like Cory Doctorow said, the enshittification process. You see it in everything. Uber used to be a fantastic experience, and now it's more expensive than taking a taxi and takes twice as long. Just Eat used to be a fantastic experience, and now they're nickel and diming you for I don't know if you have like Deliveroo or Uber Eats or anything in Australia, but the same sort of service used to be fantastic value, great service. And now the nickel and dime you with hidden charges all over the place. Everything gets shittier the more popular it becomes, because a lot of these people, they'll develop this app or this service and they don't give a shit about monetizing it. They don't care. They just want to make it as good as possible to get the maximum number of users to make it look good for investors, so they can sell it for a couple of $100 million to an investor, and then the investor starts making it shit by
Look at
charging you for
Fortnite
everything.
with all the collabs that they do with the most random, like the worst I saw was, I think it's Call of Duty, and there's a guy, Only Knives, I think I watch every now and then, and some of the skins they brought into that game, which used to be back in the day, Modern Warfare and all the rest of it. Now you've got Beavis and Butthead running around in Call of Duty maps, and you're just like,
Yeah,
I get it. I get
just,
that you guys need to make money and you've got shareholders and all the rest of it, but it's
but fuck off, I think is the phrase you're looking for.
mate, you should try playing World of Warships on the Asian servers.
No
Like,
thanks.
oh my god, there is a part of me that wants to F11. I'll use a DayZ term, so we don't get completely monetized. But if I see another fucking insert random hentai anime girl name is my waifu, I'm gonna explode one day. It's like, oh my god. And they're all sailing around with their little hentai anime girl high school fleet captains and all the rest of it. But I get it. They're making bank. And I at the end of the day, I'm a capitalist whore at heart. I've got no issue with someone making a buck, but I'd just rather you did it ethically and not charge people $500 for the Puerto Rico Black Friday bundle of for a pixel ship.
I used to run a mod in World of Warships that would change all of the more outlandish camo schemes into an historical camo scheme, so that warships actually look like warships, and I wasn't playing a game watching Godzilla piggybacking on an Atago while I'm trying to take the game moderately seriously. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I made the mistake once of I've got one captain that was an anime, and I launched the game and the voiceover, and then I Googled it, and I found a way to make my default captain. And you'll be pleased to know that your voice is my default captain, because I can handle the silliness. And you've sunk a destroyer when I sunk an airship, an aircraft carrier or something.
They've changed that. I don't misreport ships anymore. They've changed it. Now I get them right every time.
I never even noticed that. I never even noticed. But
apparently it's confusing too many people.
Oh.
Don't you know who I am?
But that's also part and parcel, getting back to the YouTube thing of, I love the fact that you and your community have embraced the whole, actually, and I'm going to report to the salt mines now for my extra ship.
Yeah, you got to lean into that shit.
I've got there's a couple of guys who are just starting another DayZ podcast, and I always I wasn't the first ever DayZ podcast. That was done by two legends of the game, a British guy by the name of Super FT Lol, and a Dutch guy by the name of Rene or Barely Infected. But theirs only lasted about 10 or so episodes. Then another guy tried it, and he stopped doing it because it's quite a lot of people don't realize how much work goes into doing a weekly podcast on a specific game. And I did it for, I think, about 4 years or so, had a number of co-hosts coming on, and eventually my heart just wasn't in it anymore. So I stopped. I'll still do occasional episodes, but the one thing I always said was, it's not something I'm ever going to lay claim to being the owner of. I freely admit that I took inspiration from others, and I shout those people out as often as I can. But every time I find out about someone else, I ask them, anything I can do to help you, let them know. And these two guys said to me, we want to make sure it's really serious. And I said, don't be too serious though, because you've got to embrace your quirks. And that's one of the things I love about the Friendly Lads. One of the things I love about you. I've got my own, the guys even made up a DayZ podcast bingo card. Boydie will bring up and these things will happen. And it was. He'll
You've
mention
got
he was in the
it's
army.
who
He'll
it's
mention he
who
ran
you
a
are.
trader.
It's who
And
you
you've
are.
got to don't
Embrace
it's
it.
how you spot the phonies, isn't it? Like
Exactly.
the people who try to hide who they really are, and then eventually it'll come out. Like I'm a bit of a contentious figure in the DayZ community. There are some people who hate me. There are some people who love me. But to the ones who hate me, I'll say, hey, at least you get what I am. I'm uncouth. I say retard. I say cunt. I swear.
They hate you. They don't hate who you're pretending to be. So at least they
Yeah.
hate you for a good reason.
Yeah, exactly. And I'll make no apologies for being who I am. It's who I am. And I'm a product of my environment and my upbringing and my military service and my wife and my son and my dogs and everything happening around me. But I'll always be genuine to who I am. And that's one of the things I love about your videos is, I've never really noticed any change in your personality from all the videos back when you had your old. I remember being quite upset when you changed your intro to the World of Warships, but I'm so used to it now that when I do click on an older one, it's like, oh wow, I really do see why he changed his intro.
Yeah, I mean, because trying to put a fake persona on it would be a lot of work. But I mean, minimum of six videos a week trying to put the same fake personality on. Eventually, I'd slip, and people can tell a fake a mile away. And people are a lot smarter than you give them credit for. And I think you're right. I think that might be one of the reasons why I've done as well as I have, because what you see is what you get. I really am this shit. and you got to embrace that. It's who you are. If people are here, it's because they like who you are. So don't try and change it, And there is nobody in the world who's better at being you than you. So just be you, because nobody else can be better than you at doing it. Don't try and be the next PewDiePie or the next Mr. Beast or whatever, because Mr. Beast is already the best Mr. Beast there is ever going to be. But nobody is going to be a better you than you are. So be you and be good at it, because that's what you're good at. And people will know when you're trying to fake it. Eventually, they'll catch you out. So don't. Oh wow! I've gone all full screen. I must be getting serious. Boydie, where you at? I think something's happened to Boydie. Oh no, I guess I'm running the show now. So any questions there in chat that I can answer while we're waiting for Boydie to get back, assuming this is still going out? Okay. I can let you know his power just dropped. He's waiting for the modem to restart. He just sent me a DM on Discord, probably over his phone. All right, let's get back. Everybody's laughing their asses off. I was wondering why I'd suddenly gone full stream. Are we back? Something just happened. There he is.
We are back. I just had a power flicker.
There it is. I'll
there we go. Yep.
I saw the DM on. I saw the DM on Discord. I'll let them know what happened. I wondered why I'd suddenly gone full screen and you disappeared. I was just rabbiting on.
That's one of the.
I'm going to have to knock it on the head soon, though. I'm currently tracking a delivery that's going to be here in the next 10 minutes. So I'm going to have to knock this on the head very soon.
We will. There was a couple of other things. Okay, so one thing I did want to talk about is you got to go to Russia
several times. Yeah, it was great.
Yep,
until it wasn't.
It is an amazing country, and I really I really feel for the average Russian person at the moment. I got to go there on a holiday in 2019, and we went through all the way on the Trans-Siberian across to Moscow, and then we went to Volgograd, we went to St. Petersburg, we went to the Kubinka Tank Museum. Have you been there?
No, Kubinka is Moscow. I've been to St. Petersburg. I've been to the Artillery Museum and the Peter and Paul Museum.
Went to the Peter and Paul, but didn't go to the Artillery one.
Oh, the Artillery one's really good, and the Aurora's just around the corner from the Artillery Museum as well, and that's not bad.
The naval ship. We didn't get to go to that. I got really bad food poisoning in St. Petersburg from a raw egg with a carbonara, which I'm still pissed about. Yeah, but no, they're an amazing people.
They really
It's
are.
just it's just an unfortunate thing. It's one of those things that, don't judge a country by its government. Same as China.
No,
Chinese people are awesome, but
yeah.
Xi Jinping, Winnie the Pooh, he's a bit of
Unfortunately,
an arsehole.
yeah. Unfortunately, the scum tends to rise to the top.
But what was your experience like in St. Petersburg?
It's fantastic.
Beautiful city.
It's just so that classical Russian architecture. You can see why it was the capital for so long. It was just a beautiful, beautiful city. The people were fantastic. It's like you say, just don't judge your people by their government. Because usually the people are great. People are people. You go anywhere, people are basically the same everywhere. They just want to have a roof over their heads, food on the table, and be able to look after their family. Anything beyond that is just bullshit. Don't judge people by their government. The Russian government are a bunch of arseholes. The Chinese government are a bunch of arseholes. The British and American governments are a bunch of arseholes. And I dare say the Australian government are a bunch of arseholes as well.
Look, that's one thing I've said many a time is one of the biggest things that makes me always scratch my head, Jingles, is people who idolize politicians like they're rock stars.
Oh, no, yeah, you're right. Yeah, there are people like that.
Yeah.
No, I don't get it either, but,
I just watched a very good video from a great English YouTuber by the name of Simon Whistler. You know who he lives in the Czech Republic now.
This guy has about 15 different YouTube channels, and they're all good.
He is literally the he is the end boss of how to YouTube.
Yes.
He has a team of people, but he had this 50 things that governments around the world would wish you could forget. And at the end of the day, no matter who this politician is, they'll all sell you under a bus if they think there's anything in it for them. Never trust them, people. Yeah, look at the British government with the testing that they did on soldiers at the Porton Downs, is it?
Yeah, Porton Downs.
Yes. Porton Down, that's the one.
Porton Down tested LSD on them. And tested various different nerve agents on them and shit. These were serving soldiers. And
the Australian government let the UK drop a nuke in Australia, and they made soldiers go out there to be there for the radiation of it out there in Woomera. Good question there from Paddy Melt. I was wondering how your military service transferred over into your personal and gaming life.
Personal life, actually, because one thing, and I'm sure it's the same in the army as well, because nothing killed more servicemen than disease. And so cleanliness and squaring everything away gets drilled into you very, very early on during training.
Squared away. I like that.
Yeah. So personal admin, I think they call it in the British Army. We don't really have a phrase for it in the Navy. It's just the way things are. You make sure everything's clean at all times. Particularly in the Navy, of course, because when you go to action, the ship gets hit by things that make loud bangs. Anything that's not securely stowed away suddenly turns into instant shrapnel. So just tidying stuff up and putting it away, everything. I mean, okay, you can see in the background all the shit that, but generally speaking, any place where I live or where there are going to be other people, it's spotless. And that was drummed into me throughout my time in the Navy. I have no danger of explosions generating instant shrapnel from unsecured stuff where I am now, but it just became a habit, and I live better because of it. I've always said, if you see something that needs doing or needs cleaning and it takes you less than a minute to do it, don't walk past it. Do it now. If it takes more than a minute, then fine. Schedule a time to take care of it later. But if it's just like literally a piece of like an envelope or something lying on the floor, pick it up and put it in the bin because it takes you less than a minute.
What do you think when you see videos of someone like XQC and the pile of trash that he has next to him, and people like Asmongold?
I couldn't. It would make my skin.
He's quite a funny guy, but it does do my head in.
It works for him, but it would make my skin crawl. I've known people, great people, who lived like that, where they would just they'd order a pizza, and then they'd eat the pizza, and then they just dump the pizza box on the floor next to their gaming chair, carry on playing, and then they'll have a Chinese takeaway, and eventually they're just surrounded by piles of takeaway containers, months old, and they're fantastic people, but I could not live like that. I've known some very, very
Is that
nice
your
people.
package arriving?
It's something just happened. Hang on a second.
That was
Yes,
Jingles, not you, folks.
I have to go.
Well,
I've got
Jingles,
I've got a
it's been an
grocery
honor and a
delivery.
pleasure. It's been an honor and a pleasure. We didn't get to cover your health, but I wish you all the best with your health issues, my man. Like you were saying before the show, it seems like you're well and truly on the mend. You said you never felt better.
Yeah, I feel fine. Despite everything that's happened, I feel better than I have, since I was 30. Because the health scares have forced me to change my lifestyle. And so it's been a positive. I mean, nobody wants to have cancer or a heart attack or diabetes, but the fact that I have had those three things have forced me to reevaluate what's important in life, and I'm better for it. Yeah,
and my wife and I are going through the same, and we totally understand it.
Yes.
So all the best to you and your cats, mate.
Thank you.
Akazuki.
That's Juicy back there. We haven't had sign of the other two, but Juicy does like to be near me most of the time.
Yeah,
my old ginger lady. She's 14 this year.
I'm a golden retriever, man.
Oh, fantastic dog! All dogs are amazing, but golden retrievers in particular are just the best.
Sir, thank you so much. All the best, ladies and gentlemen. Please check out Jingles. If you are at all interested in military history and video games, you will definitely love his channels because he intersperses comedy, some classic British one-liners. That line about you managed to fall into a bucket of tits and still managed to come out sucking your thumb was just one of the sort of classic Jingles lines you'll get to hear. But yeah, all the best, sir.
Cheers.
And ciao for now.
Thank you very much.